The arrival of dreams. The summer I arrived in West Egg, the world seemed wrapped in gold. Long Island's shoreline gleamed under a relentless sun, its waters whispering promises of fortune and new beginnings. My small rented cottage, modest and plain, crouched beside a sprawling palatial mansion. Night after night, that mansion blazed with light, and its gardens overflowed with laughter, music, and the pop of champagne corks. Yet for all the crowds that came and went, the owner remained a mystery. I am Nick Carraway, a recent Yale graduate and veteran of the Great War, drawn eastward by the lure of opportunity. Banking, they said, was the way to prosperity, and I meant to find my place in it. But my curiosity soon drifted away from financial ambition, pulled instead toward the enigmatic figure who lived next door, the man known only as Gatsby. The first time I glimpsed him was not at one of his legendary parties, but on an ordinary evening as twilight bled into night. I caught sight of a solitary figure at the edge of his lawn, arms stretched out toward a distant green light flickering across the bay. He stood utterly still, as if willing the light to come closer, to bridge the invisible gulf between what was and what might be. In town, the rumors swirled like cigarette smoke. Gatsby had been a German spy, a murderer, a prince, a pauper. No one knew the truth, and few cared to. They came for the spectacle, not the man. Rolls-Royces lined his driveway. Jazz spilled into the warm night air. Yet, beneath the glitter, there was a hunger, a yearning so raw it seemed to seep from the very stones of that grand estate. Across the bay, in the more fashionable East Egg, lived my cousin Daisy Buchanan and her husband Tom. Daisy, with a laugh like silver bells and eyes full of fleeting dreams, had once meant something pure and untouchable to me. Tom, by contrast, was all muscle and arrogance, a man accustomed to taking what he pleased. The world around me pulsed with energy, yet it felt oddly hollow, as though everyone moved in a fragile, shimmering dream that could shatter at any moment. I sensed that Gatsby, whoever he truly was, had built his own dream, fragile, brilliant, and desperately clung to. One evening, as I stood on my porch watching the distant parties unfold, a thought anchored itself in my mind. Gatsby was not chasing wealth or fame. He was chasing something far more elusive, something that had once lived across that bay and still called to him with a whisper only he could hear. And somehow, though I could not yet explain it, I knew that I was already part of his story. Echoes of love and lies. It was at one of Gatsby's glittering parties that I finally met the man behind the legend. Amid the sea of dazzling gowns and polished shoes, he stood apart, not by grandeur but by a strange, almost boyish sincerity. Gatsby's smile, rare and genuine, seemed to understand you the moment it touched you, as if he had been waiting for you all along. "Nick Carraway," he said warmly, offering his hand. "I'm Gatsby." There was no thunderclap, no dramatic reveal, just a quiet, almost awkward encounter that felt curiously intimate in the midst of spectacle. His voice carried a soft, deliberate charm, each word shaped with care, as though he were building something fragile with them. Over time, Gatsby drew me into his confidence. In the pale hours of morning, long after the crowds had vanished, he spoke of a dream he had never let go. At the heart of it was Daisy Buchanan, the golden girl across the bay, his lost love from a lifetime ago. They had met before the war, when Gatsby was just a poor officer with no future to offer her. But he had carried the memory of her, flawless, untouched by time, through every hardship, every success. "Can't repeat the past," Gatsby said once, his voice almost pleading. "Why, of course you can." It was then I understood. All the wealth he had amassed, all the lavish parties thrown, they were not for society's approval. They were for her. Each light strung along his gardens, every champagne bottle uncorked, every note of music drifting into the night. All of it was a beacon, a call meant only for Daisy. Yet time had changed Daisy in ways Gatsby refused to see. She lived now in a world shaped by wealth and convenience, shielded by Tom Buchanan's arrogance and the hollow armor of privilege. Tom, with his contemptuous smirk, sensed Gatsby's yearning and marked him as an enemy. In hushed meetings and nervous glances, Gatsby and Daisy rekindled their old flame. Yet even in their stolen moments, a trembling doubt hovered. Daisy wavered between the memory of love and the comfort of her current life, caught between two powerful tides. I watched it unfold with a sense of helpless inevitability. Gatsby was chasing not a woman, but a dream, a perfect, unreachable vision he had sculpted in his heart for too long. Daisy, vibrant yet fragile, could never truly live up to the image Gatsby had preserved. The stage was set. The bright, shimmering world around us pulsed with anticipation, straining under the weight of hopes too heavy to bear. In Gatsby's eyes, the future still burned green and bright. But in the gathering shadows, the first cracks had already begun to show. And soon, the delicate illusion would be forced to confront the unforgiving truth. The fall of illusions. The day of reckoning came heavy with heat, the air thick and suffocating. Even the sunlight seemed angry, pressing down upon us as if the world itself anticipated the storm that was about to break. In a stifling hotel room, with the windows thrown open to catch a breath of absent wind, the confrontation erupted. Tom Buchanan, with his brutish confidence, lashed out at Gatsby, his words cruel and deliberate. He mocked Gatsby's origins, stripped away the glittering armor Gatsby had so carefully forged, exposing the raw, desperate dream beneath. "You're not one of us," Tom sneered. "You never were." Gatsby, usually composed, faltered. Yet when he turned to Daisy, his entire being pleaded not for dignity, but for hope, for her to deny Tom, to choose him, to prove that the years had meant something. Daisy, trembling and tearful, hesitated. For a heartbeat, the universe seemed to balance on the edge of her lips. But fear, cold and relentless, crept into her eyes. The moment passed. Her voice, once filled with promises of forever, cracked under the weight of reality. "I did love him once," she whispered. The words shattered the illusion. Gatsby recoiled, the dream slipping from his grasp even as he tried to clutch at its fading edges. Yet even then, he refused to surrender. In his mind, the past was not dead. It was merely sleeping, waiting to be revived. The ride back was steeped in silence. The day's violence had not yet spent itself. As evening fell, tragedy unfolded with a terrible inevitability. Driving Gatsby's yellow car, Daisy struck and killed Myrtle Wilson, Tom's mistress, who had darted into the road, desperate and confused. The impact was brutal, final, and the echoes of it would ripple outward, unstoppable. But Gatsby, unwavering, took the blame. When I found him later that night, hidden in the shadows of Daisy's house, he spoke only of her, how he would protect her, how everything could still be mended. "She'll call," he said quietly, gazing at the dark windows with a faith that defied reason. Inside, Daisy and Tom were seated at their table, their heads bowed close together, plotting their escape from the chaos they had created. The world they inhabited, insulated by money and privilege, would close ranks to shield them. Gatsby, drenched in the sincerity of his love, could not see the truth staring back at him. He was no longer part of Daisy's world. Perhaps he never had been. The night deepened, heavy with broken dreams. The brilliant mansion stood silent, its lights extinguished, its gardens empty. Somewhere across the bay, the green light still blinked, faint, distant, unreachably far. And as Gatsby waited in the shadows, the darkness crept closer, bearing the weight of a fate he refused to believe could ever find him. The lonely goodbye. Morning came slow and gray, dragging a brittle, uneasy quiet across Gatsby's estate. The gardens, once vibrant with music and laughter, now stood abandoned, their wilting flowers bowing under the weight of the damp air. In the stillness, Gatsby waited, clinging to the final threads of a dream unraveling before him. The call he longed for never came. Instead, fate arrived in the form of George Wilson, grief-stricken, lost in a haze of sorrow and rage. Fed lies by Tom Buchanan, George believed Gatsby was responsible for Myrtle's death. Guided by blind vengeance, he found his way to the silent mansion. 2 shots cracked through the morning air, sharp and final. Gatsby, floating in the cool blue water of his pool, collapsed into stillness. The dreamer, whose love had defied time itself, was gone, swallowed not by enemies of ambition, but by the very illusions he had lived for. News of Gatsby's death spread quickly, yet those who had once crowded his home now evaporated like mist under the sun. Invitations were ignored, condolences absent. The crowds that had once feasted beneath his stars could not be stirred to attend his final hour. I alone was left to arrange his funeral, haunted by the loneliness that clung to every corner of his empty house. Even Daisy, for whom Gatsby had given everything, had vanished, retreating with Tom into a cocoon of wealth and indifference, leaving no address, no word, no memory. Standing by Gatsby's grave, with only a few curious strangers and a grieving father in attendance, I understood the brutal truth. Gatsby had believed in the green light, that shimmering symbol of possibility, renewal, and dreams reborn. But the world he believed in had long since turned to dust. In the final days before I left West Egg, I wandered through the deserted halls of Gatsby's mansion. The chandeliers hung like forgotten promises. The grand staircase creaked with every step. Outside, the bay stretched wide and endless, the green light blinking faintly in the distance. Not a beacon but a fading echo. We are, I realized, boats against the current, endlessly borne back into the past, struggling, yearning, but never quite